Hurry! Go save him. The neighbor lady was so anxious she spun around in circles. I was in the yard drying corn when I heard her shout. The basket in my hands didn't even pause midair. Well, if he fell, he fell, I said flatly. It's not like I can swim. Everyone in the village froze in shock. It was the autumn of 1982, and something happened by the river in Willow Creek Village that shook the whole place. I had been crouching by the riverbank, washing clothes, when I suddenly heard a loud splash. Turning my head, I saw my husband, John Miller, a soldier who had just returned from the army, thrashing wildly in the water. By all logic, I should have screamed for help or jumped in after him. But instead, I stood up, brushed the water off my hands, and unhurriedly went back to scrubbing the laundry. "Mary, are you out of your mind? That's your husband," cried Mrs. Brown, one of the village women, stomping her foot in panic as she pointed at me. I didn't even lift my head. "Mrs. Brown, your eyesight must be failing. That man doesn't look like my husband to me." "What do you mean, not your husband? That's clearly John Miller." Only then did I slowly raise my head and glance at the figure struggling in the river. "You're right," I said calmly. "It is John Miller." "Then why aren't you saving him?" "Why should I?" I replied, my tone as calm as if we were talking about what to cook for dinner. Mrs. Brown was so shocked she couldn't speak for a moment. Then she jabbed her finger at me and yelled, "Mary, you heartless woman, even if you two had problems, you can't just stand there and watch him drown." The other women washing clothes nearby quickly gathered around, all talking at once. "Yeah, Mary, no matter what, John is still your husband. He's always treated you pretty well, hasn't he? You're being too cruel. Enough talking, save him first." But despite their shouting, none of them dared to go into the water. It was autumn, and the river was icy cold and deep. None of them could swim, and no one was brave enough to jump in. Meanwhile, John, struggling in the water, grew weaker and weaker. I stayed crouching by the riverbank, calmly rubbing the coarse fabric in my hands, as if the one drowning wasn't my husband, but some stray dog that had wandered too far. "Mary, what on earth are you thinking?" Mrs. Brown's eyes filled with tears. At last, I set down the wet clothes, stood up, and brushed the water from my hands. "Mrs. Brown," I said evenly, "did you forget what you told me yesterday? That John and Linda Green were hugging each other behind the hill?" At once, the riverside fell silent. Mrs. Brown's face changed, and she stammered, "That may be true, but you still can't just let him die." "Why not?" I sneered. "If he's got the strength to roll around with another woman, I'm sure his swimming's just fine. He doesn't need me to save him." With that, I knelt back down and kept washing my clothes. By then, John had nearly sunk beneath the surface. Everyone watched me, too stunned to speak. At that critical moment, a rush of hurried footsteps came from behind. "John, John," a young woman's voice shouted. I didn't even need to turn around to know who it was. Linda Green, the prettiest girl in the village, and my husband's mistress. She ran straight to the riverbank, saw John struggling in the water, and moved to jump in. "Linda, don't, you can't swim." Mrs. Brown grabbed her arm. Linda burst into tears. "Then what should we do? John's going to die." She turned toward me, her eyes full of tears. "Please, Mary, please save him." When I heard her call me sister-in-law, I couldn't help but laugh. "Linda," I said coldly, "since you call me sister-in-law, you should know what a proper place in a relationship means. If you two love each other, then saving him is naturally your job. Why should I, the wronged wife, save the man who's my rival?" Linda Green turned beet red at my words, tears streaming down her face. "Sister-in-law, John and I really didn't do anything. Don't misunderstand," she sobbed. I stood up and looked down at her. "Then tell me, what were you two doing behind the hill last night? Looking at the moon?" Linda's face flushed even deeper, and she kept her head down, unable to answer. By then, John had completely sunk. Only a few bubbles rippled on the surface. Everyone who saw that froze. The next moment, someone might really die. "Quick, go call Village Chief Shu and get people to help," someone shouted, and the crowd began to panic. But by the time the able-bodied men from the village arrived, it was already too late. I packed up the wash basin and started for home. I had barely taken 2 steps when a splashing sound came from behind me. Turning, I saw a soaked figure pulling himself out of the river, none other than John Miller. He was dripping wet, his hair plastered to his forehead, looking at me with a complicated expression. A sigh of relief ran through the crowd. Thank God, John's okay. You scared me to death. I thought someone had really died, they said. But as I looked at the drenched John, I couldn't help smiling coldly inside. Just as I suspected, John's swimming skills were one of the best in the army. That drowning scene had been a show staged by him and Linda for my sake. Their aim was simple, to test whether I still had feelings for him. Too bad for them, their scheme misfired. Reborn this time, I, Mary, was no longer the naive, sweet, educated youth daughter-in-law I once had been. When they'd finished their little performance, I asked him coldly, "Enough acting?" John froze for a moment, surprised that I would be so blunt. "Mary, what are you saying? I nearly drowned just now." "Oh, really?" I walked up to him and, looking into his evasive eyes, asked, "Then why didn't you just swim straight to the far bank when you were in the water?" John's face changed. My leg cramped," he stammered. "A cramp?" I snorted. "Then why is it fine now?" I pointed to his legs as he walked normally. John was left speechless, only able to mutter that he must have been too nervous before, and now, relaxed, he was fine. Enough of this performance. I waved him off and turned to walk home. I won't play along with your drama. Behind me I heard Linda crying. "John, I'm so glad you're okay," I thought. I didn't look back. I strode home, while voices trailed after me in waves. What's wrong with Mary? Wasn't she gentle before? Maybe she's angry about John and Linda. Still, letting someone die is too much. After all, they are husband and wife. I listened to these remarks without a ripple in my heart. In my last life I had indeed been a gentle and dutiful wife, obedient to my husband and devoted to my in-laws. What did that earn me? My husband's betrayal, my rival's provocation, and the village's cold stares. In the end, I was shoved off a cliff on a snowy night by John and Linda together. Only at the moment of death did I understand that, to some people, kindness is merely a synonym for weakness to be exploited. Since heaven has given me another chance, I will make everyone who hurt me pay. Back at home, I pushed open the yard gate and saw Old Man Lee sitting in the courtyard smoking his pipe. When he saw me come in, he frowned and asked, "Where's John? Why didn't he come back with you?" "He fell into the river," I answered calmly. "What?" Old Man Lee cried, leaping to his feet and dropping his pipe. "Then why didn't you save him, Mary?" "I can't swim," I replied. "Then why didn't you call for help?" "I did. The whole village went." Old Man Lee paced in a panic. "So what's John's condition now? He should be dead, right?" I remained calm. "What did you just say?" Old Man Lee stared at me wide-eyed, as if he couldn't believe what he'd heard. "I said he should be dead," I repeated calmly, then turned and walked into the kitchen to start making dinner. Behind me, Old Man Lee roared, "Mary, have you lost your mind? That's your husband." "Is that so?" I looked back at him briefly. "Then why didn't he come home last night?" Old Man Lee froze, speechless. Everyone in the village knew that John Miller had been staying out late recently, sometimes not coming home at all. But no one said anything openly. Just then, the courtyard door creaked open. John Miller walked in, dripping wet, with Linda Green following behind him, looking uneasy and guilty. When Old Man Lee saw his son alive and well, he let out a long sigh of relief. "John, thank heavens you're all right. Your wife just told me you were dead. You scared me half to death." John's face darkened as he turned toward me. "Mary, what do you mean by that?" I was tending the fire at the stove and didn't even bother to look up. "Nothing," I said flatly. "I just told the truth." "The truth?" John's voice rose sharply. "I'm standing right here alive, and you're telling people I'm dead?" "Then I must have been mistaken," I replied calmly, my tone steady. "So you're still alive, huh?" The way I said it sounded more like regret than relief. John's face turned an ugly shade of blue. He strode up to me and barked, "Mary, what's wrong with you today? Why are you treating me like this?" I finally set down the firewood, turned around, and met his eyes. "John, let me ask you, where did you spend the night last night?" My blunt question stunned him. His eyes darted away. I was at a meeting at the village committee," he stammered. "A meeting that lasted until sunrise?" I let out a short, cold laugh. "John Miller, do you think I'm 3 years old?" Beside him, Linda Green's face turned crimson. She hung her head so low she almost disappeared into her collar. Old Man Lee looked from his son to me, his expression uneasy as he cleared his throat. Linda, it's getting late. You should go home." Linda looked as though she'd been granted a pardon. Yes, Mr. Lee, I'll go now, she said quickly and started toward the door. Wait. My voice stopped her mid-step. She froze, then turned around slowly. Yes, Mary? How old are you this year? 22, she whispered. Married yet? No, not yet. Good. I nodded. Since you're not married, you shouldn't keep running to another woman's husband's house. It's not a good look. Linda's face flushed even redder, her eyes welling with tears. Mary, I swear, John and I really didn't do anything. Is that so? I stepped closer and studied her face carefully. Then how do you explain the mark on your neck? Instinctively, Linda raised her hand to cover it, but it was already too late. John had noticed too. His expression darkened even more. Mary, don't talk nonsense. Nonsense. I turned toward him, my gaze sharp. Then why don't you explain it? That hickey on her neck, was it a mosquito bite? John opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. Old Man Lee finally saw the truth and slapped his thigh in anger. You two, what the hell is this? Linda burst into tears, covering her face as she ran out of the courtyard. Silence fell, leaving only the three of us, father, son, and me. Old Man Lee pointed a trembling finger at John. You ungrateful bastard. You have a good wife at home, and you don't cherish her. You had to go mess with some young girl. John stiffened, his neck flushing red. Dad, Linda and I really didn't do anything. Didn't do anything? Old Man Lee's beard trembled with fury. So how do you explain the mark on her neck then? I? John Miller stammered, unable to finish the sentence. I stood quietly to the side, watching the whole scene with cold detachment, a bitter smile tugging at the corner of my lips. In my past life, I had trusted this man far too much, only to be played for a fool. Every time I caught John sneaking around with Linda Green, he'd always come up with some excuse to smooth things over. And I, because I loved him, always chose to believe him. It wasn't until the very end that I realized the two of them had been together for a long time, and Linda was even pregnant with his child. Meanwhile, I, the lawful wife, had become nothing more than an obstacle in their so-called love story. Enough, I said, waving my hand. Since everything's already out in the open, let's make things clear. I looked him straight in the eye. John Miller, I'm asking you now, do you even want to continue this marriage? John froze, clearly not expecting such a blunt question. Mary, what's that supposed to mean? The literal meaning, I replied evenly. Do you want to stay with me, or do you want to be with Linda Green? John opened his mouth, but no words came out. I'll give you 3 days to think it over, I said as I turned toward the house. Once you've decided, come find me. I went inside, leaving father and son staring at each other in the yard. Outside, I heard Old Man Lee shouting, You worthless bastard. You don't even know how lucky you are. Mary's a good woman, and you don't appreciate her. Dad, it's not what you think. Not what I think. Do you take me for blind? Linda and I really didn't do anything, John insisted, still trying to defend himself. Oh, really? Old Man Lee snapped. And those marks on her neck, did I put them there? The two of them argued for a long time before John stormed off, slamming the gate behind him. I lay on the bed listening to the noise outside, yet inside I felt nothing but calm. In my past life, when I discovered his affair, I cried day and night, begging him to come back to me. And what did that earn me? More betrayal, more humiliation. Linda became even bolder, and I eventually became the village laughingstock. This time, I would never make the same mistake again. If John didn't value me, I saw no reason to keep humiliating myself for him. The next morning, I got up early to make breakfast. Old Man Lee was sitting in the yard smoking his pipe. When he saw me come out, he hesitated, clearly wanting to speak but not knowing how. Dad, if you have something to say, just say it, I said quietly. He sighed heavily. Mary, John didn't come home last night. All right, I answered simply and continued preparing breakfast. You really don't have anything to say about that? He asked, his voice rising with frustration. No, I replied. Old Man Lee looked at me, growing more anxious by the second. Mary, whatever problems you two have, you should sit down and talk it through. Don't let things get this bad. I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. Dad, do you really think a man sneaking around with another woman behind his wife's back is just a problem? He opened his mouth but couldn't find the words. Dad, I know you love your son, I continued evenly. But there are some things, some principles, that can't be solved just by talking. With that, I went back to my cooking. Just then, the courtyard door opened, and Village Chief Mr. Brown hurried in, looking flustered. "Old Lee, something serious happened," he shouted. Old Man Lee put down his pipe. "What is it?" "Your son John and Linda Green were seen together on the back hill last night." Old Man Lee's face darkened immediately. "Seen doing what?" Mr. Brown hesitated and glanced at me, unsure whether to continue. I set down the spatula in my hand. "Auntie Brown," I said calmly, "you can just say it. I'm not an outsider." Only then did Mr. Brown speak. "Someone saw the two of them, together in the grass hut behind the hill last night." He didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear enough. Old Man Lee trembled with rage. That ungrateful son of mine. I, on the other hand, remained completely calm and went on making breakfast. Mr. Brown looked surprised by my reaction. "Mary, you." "Uncle Brown," I interrupted softly, "have you had breakfast yet?" He blinked, startled. "Not yet." "Then sit down and have some," I said, stirring the pot. Mr. Brown was completely bewildered. By all logic, any woman hearing such news would have broken down in tears or caused a scene. But I acted as if nothing had happened at all. Old Man Lee sat there in silence, staring at me, unsure what to say. Old Man Lee glanced at me uneasily, then muttered under his breath, "Mary, are you sure you're all right? You seem off." "I'm fine," I replied calmly, filling a bowl of porridge and handing it to Mr. Brown. "Really, I'm fine." "Then why are you?" he began. "Why what?" I interrupted, looking straight at him. "Were you expecting me to cry and wail like my world's fallen apart?" Old Man Lee was struck speechless. Mr. Brown cleared his throat carefully and asked, "Mary, what are you planning to do now?" "What else can I do?" I sat down and began eating breakfast. "Let him figure it out for himself." "Maybe you should call him back," Old Man Lee suggested tentatively. "No need," I shook my head. "He's made his choice. He can live with the consequences." Just as I said that, the courtyard door creaked open again. John Miller walked in, head down, looking like he hadn't slept all night. There were dark circles under his eyes. When he saw Mr. Brown sitting there, his expression grew awkward. "Mr. Brown, what brings you here?" he asked stiffly. Mr. Brown forced a smile. "Oh, nothing much. Just came by to visit." Then he stood up quickly. "I should get going. I still have things to do." And with that he hurried off, leaving the yard quiet again. Now only the three of us were left. John stood there, shifting his weight, unsure what to say. Old Man Lee looked from his son to me, sighed heavily, and finally said, "I'll go check on the fields." Then he left too. The courtyard fell completely silent. Only John and I remained. I continued eating, acting as though he wasn't even there. After a long pause, John finally spoke. "Mary, can we talk?" I looked up briefly. "About what?" "About what happened yesterday." "Yesterday?" I asked flatly, pretending not to understand. He clenched his jaw. "About me and Linda." "Oh, that." I set down my chopsticks. "Have you made up your mind yet?" "Mary, He clearly wanted to explain. "Enough," I cut him off, waving a hand. "Just tell me straight. What's your choice?" John was silent for a long time. Finally he said, "Mary, can we start over?" I let out a cold laugh. "Start over? And what about Linda Green? Have you cut ties with her completely?" A flush crept up John's neck. "I'll talk to her. I'll make things clear." "Make things clear?" I stood and met his eyes. "John, do you think I'm a fool?" "That's not what I meant," he said quickly. "Oh, then where did you spend the night last night?" He opened his mouth but couldn't answer. Seeing him like that, the last bit of hope in my heart finally died. There was nothing left in this man worth saving. "John Miller," I said coldly, "I'll ask you one last time, who do you choose?" He froze, his face growing darker by the second. He began pacing back and forth in the yard, clearly battling with himself. I stood there silently, waiting for his answer. To be honest, I already knew what it would be, but I wanted to hear him say it, because in my past life, I died without ever hearing the truth from his mouth. At last, John stopped pacing and looked at me. "Mary, I don't think there's any love left between us." As expected, I'd been prepared for this, so his words didn't even sting. My heart was calm, almost numb. "If there's no love left," I said evenly, "then let's get a divorce." John blinked, stunned. Clearly he hadn't expected me to be so decisive. "Mary, you..." "What?" I cut him off again. "Were you planning to drag this out and make me live as a bitter, resentful wife for the rest of my life?" John's face flushed red with shame. "I didn't mean it like that." "Then what did you mean?" I asked coldly. John Miller fumbled for words for a long time before finally muttering, "Don't you think getting a divorce is a bit rushed? Maybe we should think it over." I let out a short, sharp laugh. "John Miller, are you planning to have it both ways?" No, that's not what I mean." "Then why can't you make up your mind?" John fell silent, unable to answer. But I knew exactly what was going through his head. He couldn't bear to let go of delicate little Linda Green, yet he also didn't want to lose me. The dutiful wife, who cooked, cleaned, and took care of everything for free. In my last life, I'd been too naive, and he'd toyed with me like a puppet. But in this life, I would never give him that chance again. "John Miller, I'll give you one last chance," I said, meeting his eyes. "Decide right now. Either you stay with me and cut all ties with Linda Green completely, or we go to the village office today and file for divorce. There's no third option." John's face showed hesitation, his expression torn and uncertain. He stood there for a long time, struggling. Then finally, he clenched his jaw and said, "Mary, let's get divorced." Even though I'd been expecting those words, hearing them out loud still pricked at my heart for a moment. But the pain passed quickly. After all, I'd already died once in my previous life. What could possibly still tie me down? "All right," I said with a nod. "Let's go to the village office now." John looked startled. "Now?" "Yes, now." I turned and went into the house, took out our household registration book and marriage certificate, and came back. "While the village chief's still around, we'll get it done." John looked at the papers in my hand, his face a mix of shock and confusion. "Mary, were you already planning this?" "What do you mean, already planning?" I replied calmly. "These are essential documents. I can't exactly hide them, can I?" He said nothing, but I could see the disbelief in his eyes. He had thought I would cry, beg, or throw myself at his feet like I used to. Too bad for him, I wasn't that foolish woman anymore. We walked together toward the village committee building. On the way, we passed several villagers. They stared at us curiously, sensing something unusual. "Mary, John, where are you two off to?" Mrs. Zhang called out. "To the village office to take care of something," I answered simply. Mrs. Zhang glanced between us, suspicion flickering in her eyes. Could it be? I didn't bother hiding it. "We're going to file for divorce." Her mouth fell open in shock. "Divorce?" "Yes, divorce," I repeated evenly. As soon as the words left my mouth, a small crowd gathered around us. "Mary, you two have been fine all this time. Why get divorced all of a sudden?" "Yeah, if there's a problem, you can talk it out. No need to go this far." "John, your wife's a good woman. Don't do something stupid." John looked uncomfortable under their concerned stares, but I stayed calm and steady. "Thank you, everyone, for your concern," I said politely. "But this is between the two of us. We've already talked it through." "Talked it through?" Mrs. Brown asked, her voice full of disbelief. "Mary, are you sure you want to go through with this?" "I'm sure." I glanced at John beside me and added, "because he's already made a new choice." The crowd fell silent for a moment, then all eyes turned to John. His face flushed crimson, and he lowered his head, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "John, is that true?" asked old Mr. Lee, one of the elder villagers. John stammered, "I just think Mary and I aren't compatible." "Not compatible?" the old man repeated, shaking his head in anger. "You've been married 3 years. Why suddenly not compatible?" Mrs. Carter snapped. "Maybe their personalities don't match," someone offered tentatively. "Personality clash?" Mrs. Carter repeated sharply. "I think he has a new lover." John's face flushed even darker. I watched from the side with cold eyes, a private smile curling at my lips. In my past life, these villagers pretended to pity me on the surface while quietly enjoying my humiliation. Now that John was the one embarrassed, they were just as eager to pile on. Human nature is like that, always hungry for spectacle. "Everyone, it's getting late. We still have to get the paperwork done." I interrupted the murmurs and kept walking. John followed behind me with his head down. When we reached the village committee office, Mr. Brown, the village head, was in his office drinking tea. He set his cup down when he saw us. "John, Mary, you're here." "Mr. Brown, we're here to file for a divorce," I said plainly. Mr. Brown almost dropped his teacup. "What? Divorce?" he blurted. He looked between us incredulously. "Are you serious?" I put our household registration book and marriage certificate on the desk. Mr. Brown picked them up, glanced them over, and then set them down slowly. "Mary, are you sure you want a divorce?" he asked. Yes. I looked at John. He was silent for a moment, then nodded. I agree, he muttered. Mr. Brown sighed. You two were fine. What happened? Is there some misunderstanding? No misunderstanding, I shook my head. We just don't fit together anymore. Don't fit? Mr. Brown found it hard to believe. You've been married 3 years. Weren't things okay before? Before was before. Now is now. I stood firm, and Mr. Brown, looking between my resolute face and John's guilty one, seemed to understand. All right, he said at last. If you both agree, I'll process it. He handed me a form. I took it and filled in the required information carefully while John sat silently at the side. When I finished, Mr. Brown checked the form and said, According to the rules, you have a 1-month cooling-off period. Can't you make an exception, Uncle Brown? I asked quietly. We've thought this through. We don't need the cooling-off period. Mr. Brown looked troubled. That's the regulation. I lowered my voice. You know how things are in this village. Rumors spread. Better to settle it quickly. Mr. Brown caught my meaning, thought for a moment, and then said, Fine, I'll make an exception this once. He stamped the form. Done. From now on, you're officially divorced. I took the divorce certificate in my hands with a complicated feeling. 3 years of marriage ended just like that. John took his copy, looking dazed. He began to say something, Mary, but I cut him off. From now on, John, we're strangers, I said. I hope you and Linda are happy. Then I turned and left the committee office while Mr. Brown sighed. Such a good couple. Outside, I took a deep breath. Finally, freedom. Let the pains of my past life be buried. This time, I would live for myself. The news of our divorce spread through the entire village in no time. By the time I reached my house, a crowd had already gathered in the yard. The village women, those who thrived on gossip, were all there, chattering animatedly. They really split up? It's true. I just came back from the village office. I saw it with my own eyes. That was so fast. They were arguing this morning, and now they're divorced by afternoon. I heard it's because John has a new woman. Tsk, tsk. Men really can't be trusted. I pushed open the gate and walked in. The chatter stopped instantly. Mary's back. Mary, are you all right? Facing their concerned looks, I smiled faintly. What could possibly be wrong with me? You just got divorced, don't you feel sad? Mrs. Zhang asked cautiously. I'm fine, I replied honestly. They all looked at me in surprise. Normally, a woman who'd just divorced would be crying her eyes out, but I looked lighter, freer, even happier than when I was married. Mary, what will you do now? Asked Mrs. Brown. What do you mean? I mean, about your future, your life. I'll live as I always have, I said simply, walking into the kitchen to start preparing dinner. The crowd exchanged confused glances, unsure what to say next. Just then, Old Man Lee came back from the fields. Seeing the yard full of people, he frowned. What's going on here? Mrs. Zhang whispered. Old Lee, your son John and Mary, they're divorced. What? The hose slipped from his hands and hit the ground with a thud. They signed the papers at the village office just now. Old Man Lee's face darkened immediately. He stormed into the kitchen. Mary, is it true? Did you two really get divorced? Without looking up from the vegetables I was chopping, I said calmly, We did. What do you mean, we did? You both actually went through with it? Didn't you already know, Dad? I replied evenly. He slapped his thigh in fury. That worthless son of mine. How did I raise such a fool? I set down the knife and looked at him. Dad, don't get too angry. What's done is done. Mary, don't you leave. Stay here. I'll drag that bastard back home. There's no need, I said, shaking my head. We're divorced now. I should move out. Move out? Where would you even go? I've thought about it, I said quietly. I'll stay with my parents for a few days, then figure out my next steps. Old Man Lee grew even more anxious. Mary, don't act out of anger. This house will always be your home. I appreciate that, Dad, I said gently, but things aren't the same anymore. It wouldn't be right for me to stay. He started pacing in distress. No, I can't let you go. Why not? I asked softly. He hesitated, then said, Because you're my daughter-in-law. Dad, I'm not anymore. I took the red divorce certificate from my pocket and held it out to him. See? It's official. Old Man Lee looked down at the document, his eyes turning red. It's all that damn boy's fault, he growled. I'll go find him and give him a piece of my mind. He turned to leave, but I quickly stopped him. Dad, please don't. It's useless. How is it useless? I'm his father. He still has to listen to me. You can control his actions, I said quietly, but you can't control his heart. Old Man Lee froze, and the villagers standing nearby fell silent too. Everyone knew I was right. Feelings couldn't be forced. Just then, John walked in through the gate. Seeing the crowd in the yard, his face stiffened. Dad, what's going on here? Old Man Lee's anger flared the moment he saw him. He strode forward and slapped him hard across the face. The sound cracked through the air, echoing in the courtyard. John staggered, clutching his cheek, speechless. You worthless fool! Old Man Lee shouted, jabbing a trembling finger in his son's face. Mary is such a good woman, and you divorced her just like that? Dad, I what? You still have the nerve to come back here? John Miller kept his head down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the commotion outside, and felt nothing at all. In my previous life, Old Man Lee had defended me the same way, but it hadn't mattered. His son's heart had already left me long ago. John, old Mr. Carter, one of the elder villagers, spoke up. Are you really divorcing Mary? John was silent for a while, then finally nodded. Why? Because we're not right for each other. Not right for each other? Mr. Carter repeated angrily. You've been married 3 years. Weren't things fine before? That was before, John muttered. Before is before, Mr. Carter interrupted sharply. Tell the truth. Did you find someone else? John's face flushed scarlet. He stammered but couldn't deny it. Everyone watching understood. John, how could you do this to Mary? Mrs. Zhang scolded. She's worked herself to the bone for your family for 3 years, never once complaining. And you, changing your heart overnight, asking for a divorce just like that, are you even a man? Under the villagers' reproachful gazes, John looked increasingly miserable. He glanced toward the kitchen, then finally muttered, It was a decision we both made. Both of you, Old Man Lee barked, furious. Don't give me that nonsense. This was your doing. He raised his hand again, ready to strike. Dad, calm down, John pleaded. How am I supposed to calm down? You let a good wife slip away. How am I supposed to face our neighbors after this? John hung his head lower, his shame written all over his face. By then I had finished cooking. Carrying a bowl of rice, I stepped into the courtyard and saw everyone still standing around. You all haven't eaten yet, have you? I said lightly. Why don't you stay for a meal? Everyone looked at me, stunned by how calm I appeared. Mary? Mrs. Zhang started hesitantly, not knowing what to say. I'm fine, I said with a small smile. Divorce isn't something to be ashamed of. Really, you don't need to worry about me. I sat down and began to eat. Old Man Lee's eyes grew red as he watched me. Mary, don't act like this. You're making me feel worse. Dad, I'm really all right, I said sincerely, putting down my chopsticks. Honestly, divorce might not be a bad thing for me. What do you mean? He asked, frowning. I said softly, I can finally live for myself. My words stunned everyone. Even John looked up at me for the first time. Mary, what do you mean by that? Mrs. Brown asked cautiously. The literal meaning, I said, taking another bite. I've spent the past 3 years living for other people. Now, I finally get to live for myself. The yard fell into silence. My words seemed to hang in the air, making everyone reflect. It was true. Over the past 3 years, I'd been like a workhorse, silently carrying the burden of the family, giving everything and asking for nothing. Now that I was divorced, I'd actually gained something priceless. Freedom. Mary, what are you planning to do next? Old Mr. Carter asked kindly. I'll take things one step at a time, I answered honestly. But I can't stay here forever. Old Man Lee grew anxious again. Mary, you can't go. Why not? I asked gently. Because this is your home. I shook my head. No, Dad, it isn't anymore. Then I stood and began clearing the dishes. The crowd watched in silence, their expressions a mix of pity, respect, and unease. John's face was pale, his eyes unfocused. It was as if, for the first time, he truly realized I was leaving for good. Mary, he started. Is there something you need? I asked without looking up. John stammered, unable to say anything. If there's nothing else, I need to pack my things, I said flatly. Then I turned and went into my room to start gathering my belongings. Outside, the sound of gossip gradually faded, and one by one the villagers began to leave. Before long, only the 2 Lee men were left in the yard. Through the window, I heard Old Man Lee shouting angrily, You useless fool! Now you regret it, don't you? It's too late. I don't regret anything, Dad, John muttered. Don't regret it? Then what are you still doing here? Go on, go find your little lover. Dad, don't call me Dad. I don't have a son like you. The two of them argued for a long time before John finally stormed off. Old Man Lee sat alone in the courtyard, smoking one cigarette after another until late at night. I finished packing and decided I would leave first thing in the morning. All the pain from my past life, I would let it stay buried in the past. This time, I would begin anew. At dawn, the next day, I got up early, ready to go. I had already made up my mind last night. I would go back to my parents' home and stay there for a while before figuring out my next steps. My family lived in the county town. My father worked at the local supply and marketing cooperative, and my mother was an elementary school teacher. We were fairly well off. Back then, when I volunteered to go to the countryside as an educated youth, it was partly out of a desire to experience rural life, and partly because I hoped to find a good man to marry. I never expected to meet someone like John Miller, a man with no loyalty or conscience. But now, everything was different. I could finally start over. I packed my luggage neatly and was about to leave for the station when I stepped out into the courtyard and saw Old Man Lee sitting there. His eyes were red and puffy. Clearly he hadn't slept all night. "Dad, you're up early," I said softly. When he saw me holding my luggage, his expression grew even sadder. "Mary, you're really leaving?" "I'll stay with my parents for a while," I replied. "And, will you come back?" he asked hesitantly. I paused, then shook my head. "Probably not." Tears welled in his eyes. "Mary, it's all that damned boy's fault. Please don't be angry with me." "I'm not angry with you, Dad." I stepped closer and looked him in the eye. "You've always treated me kindly, and I'll never forget that. But things have changed. It wouldn't be right for me to stay here anymore." Old Man Lee nodded, though his face was full of sorrow. He knew I was right. "Then, take care of yourself," he said quietly. "You too." I reached into my bag and pulled out some money. "Here, take this and buy yourself something good to eat." No, I can't take your money," he said quickly, waving his hands. "Please, Dad," I insisted, pressing the bills into his hand. "Just think of it as a small token of gratitude. Who knows if we'll ever see each other again." The old man's lips trembled, and tears finally spilled down his cheeks. That 70-year-old man cried like a child, clutching the money in his rough hands. Watching him like that made my heart ache. To be honest, Old Man Lee truly was a good man. He had always treated me well. It was just unfortunate that his son turned out to be such a disappointment. "Dad, please don't cry," I said gently. "I have to go now." He wiped his tears and stood. "I'll walk you to the station." "That's not necessary. I can go by myself." "At least write to us when you get there," he said with a trembling voice. "I will." I lifted my bag onto my shoulder and turned toward the gate. Just as I reached it, the door creaked open, and John walked in. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't slept either. "Mary, what's this?" he asked, staring at my luggage. "I'm going back to my parents' house," I said coolly. "When will you come back?" "I'm not." John froze, taken aback. "Why? Do I need a reason?" I shot back. He opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. We were divorced now. What reason could I possibly have to stay? "Mary, He looked like he wanted to say something. "If you have something to say, just say it," I told him calmly. John hesitated for a long time before finally saying, "Take care of yourself after you leave." I let out a cold laugh. "Thanks for the concern." Then I turned to go. "Mary," he suddenly called after me. I stopped and turned around. "What is it?" I just wanted to ask, do you hate me?" That question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a moment, then slowly shook my head. "No, I don't." "Really?" he asked softly, disbelief in his voice. I met his eyes. "Hating someone is exhausting. I don't want to waste my energy on that." His expression grew complicated. "Then, can you forgive me?" "Forgive you?" I let out a small laugh. "John, there's no right or wrong in matters of the heart, and there's nothing to forgive. You chose Linda because she suits you better than I do. There's nothing wrong with that. The only mistake was that we made the wrong choice in the beginning." Hearing that, John's eyes turned red. "Mary?" "Enough," I cut him off before he could continue. "Let's part on good terms." And with that, I turned and walked away. Behind me, I could hear Old Man Lee shouting again, "You useless fool! Now you regret it?" Too late. I didn't look back. I just kept walking. As I made my way through the village carrying my luggage, people came out to watch. Some looked like they wanted to stop me, to say something, but when they saw the determination on my face, they stayed silent. At the edge of the village, I stopped and looked back at the place I'd lived in for 3 years. To say I felt no attachment would be a lie. But holding on to the past was meaningless. Life had to move forward. I boarded the bus to the county town. As it started moving, I saw John running after it. He stopped at the roadside, watching as the bus drove away, his face distant and dazed. But none of that mattered to me anymore. The farther the bus went, the smaller Willow Creek Village became until it vanished completely. I leaned my head against the window, my emotions a mix of relief and melancholy. This time, I would live for myself, never again as someone else's shadow. A few hours later, the bus arrived in the county town. My family's home looked just the same as before. When my parents saw me standing at the door, they were both startled. "Mary, what are you doing back here?" my mother asked. "Mom," I said plainly, "John and I got divorced." "What?" Both of them were stunned. "Divorced?" my father repeated, his voice rising. "Why?" I briefly explained what had happened. By the time I finished, both of them were furious. "That John, he looked so honest when we first met him," my father said, slamming his hand on the table. "I can't believe he turned out to be that kind of man." "Mary, you poor girl," my mother said, gripping my hand tightly. "I'm fine, Mom," I said with a small smile. "Honestly, I feel lighter now." My mother frowned. "What are you going to do from here?" "I'm thinking of finding a job here in the county," I said. "That's a good idea," my father agreed immediately. "You finished high school. It shouldn't be hard for you to find something decent." Their support warmed my heart. Maybe starting over wouldn't be so hard after all. After staying with my parents for a few days, I began looking for work. The county wasn't big, but there were still opportunities if you knew where to look. I first went to the local supply and marketing cooperative to see if there were any open positions. The director there happened to be an old friend of my father's. When he heard about my situation, he looked at me with sympathy. "Mary, you're well educated," he said kindly. "We actually need an accountant right now. Would you be interested?" "An accountant?" I asked in surprise, "but I've never studied accounting." "That's fine," he said with a smile. "You can learn on the job. We really need someone right away. You came at the perfect time." I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll give it a try." "Good," he said, pleased. "You can start work tomorrow," the director said with a smile. And just like that, I found myself a job at the County Supply and Marketing Cooperative. The pay wasn't high, but it was enough for me to live on my own. The position was steady, and there was room to grow. More importantly, for the first time in my life, I was financially independent. I no longer had to rely on anyone or live by anyone else's moods. On my first day, I focused on learning everything I could. Accounting work was detailed and sometimes complicated, but I picked things up quickly. My coworkers were friendly, and the director often guided me personally. After a week, I'd already mastered most of the basics. One evening after work, my mother asked, "How's the job going?" "Everything okay?" "It's going well," I said. "Everyone's been really kind." "That's good," she smiled. "Mary, you seem so much happier now than before." She was right. I was far happier than I had been during those 3 years of marriage. Living alone could be a little lonely at times, but at least I was free. I didn't have to tiptoe around a husband's moods or guess what he was thinking. That peace of mind felt wonderful. After a month of working, I decided to move out of my parents' home. I rented a small apartment in town. It wasn't large, but I decorated it warmly, and it felt cozy. For the first time, I had a space entirely my own. Every day when I came home from work, I felt content just looking around at my little home. Sometimes I ate dinner alone, but I didn't feel lonely. Instead, I found the quiet comforting. I liked this kind of life, simple, calm, and mine. 2 months passed, and my life had settled into a steady rhythm. I worked at the cooperative during the day, came home at night to read or study, and visited my parents on weekends. My days were ordinary but full. Then one evening, just as I was leaving work, I ran into someone I hadn't expected to see. It was Linda Green. She was standing outside the entrance, her expression uneasy. "Mary?" She caught herself. "I mean Mary." I stopped walking and looked at her coolly. What do you want? I'd like to talk to you, she said softly. Talk about what? There's nothing left between us. Linda bit her lip. It's about John. I let out a cold laugh. He's yours now. What does he have to do with me? No, he isn't, she said, her eyes reddening. John and we broke up. That surprised me for a moment, but then I thought about it and found it perfectly predictable. A relationship built on betrayal never lasts long. So what? I asked indifferently. He regrets it, Linda whispered. John said he wants you to come back. I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. Linda, what do you take me for? A dog you can call back whenever you feel like it. Her face turned bright red. That's not what I meant. Then what do you mean? I stepped closer, my tone sharp. You two got bored with each other, so now you remember the wife you tossed aside? No, John really regrets everything. Regrets? I cut her off. What exactly does he regret? Sleeping with you? Or divorcing me? Linda stammered, unable to speak. Watching her, I almost found it funny. Tell me, Linda, I said coldly. Did you two break up because he wanted to get back with me, or because of something else? Her face flushed even deeper. She lowered her head and said nothing. Seeing that, I already knew the answer. So that was it. John had used her, gotten tired, and thrown her away. Now, alone and empty-handed, he suddenly remembered the wife who once cooked, cleaned, and cared for him for free. What a joke. Linda, I said icily, let me give you some advice. John Miller isn't someone you can rely on. You'd better stay far away from him. But I love him. She burst into tears. Love him? I laughed bitterly. If you truly loved him, why did you become the other woman? If it was real love, you would have waited until he was divorced to be with him. Linda said nothing, her tears falling silently. And really, what could she say? If their love had been genuine, why had it needed to be hidden in the shadows? And if John truly loved you, I added quietly, why did he throw you away so easily? I'll tell you what, I said coldly, my voice steady. John Miller is just a man who can't take responsibility. He treated me that way, and now he's treating you the same. Linda began crying harder, tears streaming down her face, but I felt no sympathy at all. In my previous life, this very woman had joined hands with him to push me off a cliff. Now that she'd been abandoned, it was nothing but karma. Linda, I said firmly, go back and tell John that I'm doing just fine, so he doesn't need to worry about me. And tell him this too. Whatever was between us is over. From now on, he and I have nothing to do with each other. He shouldn't ever come looking for me again. Linda sobbed behind me as I turned away, but I didn't look back. Walking home, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. John regretted it now. He wanted to make up? What a joke. When I had begged him tearfully to take me back in my past life, where was he? When he was holding Linda in his arms, whispering sweet nothings, did he ever think of how I felt? And now, when he's tired of playing, when he's realized how hard it is to live alone, suddenly he remembers how good I was? How convenient. When I got home, I made myself a bowl of noodles, ate quietly, and was about to sit down with a book when I heard someone shouting my name from downstairs. Mary! Mary! I went to the window. To my astonishment, it was John. He stood down below, looking up at my apartment window, unshaven and disheveled, his clothes wrinkled and his face drawn with fatigue. I pushed the window open. What are you doing here? I asked sharply. Mary, can we talk? He pleaded. There's nothing left for us to talk about. Mary, I know I was wrong. Ramet, he said desperately. Can't you forgive me? Forgive you? I laughed bitterly. You've got some nerve, John. I mean it this time, he said. I really regret everything. Do you? I cut him off. Then why is it only after you and Linda broke up that you suddenly remembered I exist? He flushed, clearly embarrassed. It's not what you think. Then what is it? He hesitated, fumbling for words, but nothing came out. Watching him squirm only made my disgust deepen. Tell me, John, I said icily, between you and Linda, did you dump her, or did she dump you? His face turned even redder. The guilt was written all over it. I smirked. So I was right. He hadn't left her. She'd left him. Maybe he'd gotten bored, or maybe he'd realized Linda wasn't as easy to control as I had been. Listen carefully, John Miller, I said, my voice like ice. We're divorced. Legally, we're strangers. Don't come looking for me again, and don't you dare interfere with my life. Mary, can't we start over? He begged. Start over? I laughed out loud. Do you really think I'm the kind of woman you can play with whenever you feel like it? Want me when it's convenient, toss me aside when it's not, and then come crawling back when you need me again? Forget it, John. That door's closed." With that, I slammed the window shut. He stood outside for a long time, motionless, before finally walking away. I sat on the edge of my bed, unable to calm down for a long while. In my past life, if I'd heard him say he regretted it, if he'd said he wanted to make things right, I would have forgiven him instantly. I would have gone back to living that miserable life, forever watching his moods, hoping for scraps of affection. But not this time. In this life, I would never make the same mistake again. Some things, once broken, can never be fixed. Once a person has left, there's no going back. The next day at work, my coworker Lisa leaned over to me with a teasing grin. "Mary," she whispered, "last night there was a man standing under your building for a long time. Was that your admirer?" I shook my head. "No, that was my ex-husband." Lisa blinked in surprise. "Your ex-husband? What did he want?" "He wants to get back together." "And did you say yes?" she asked curiously. "Of course not," I said flatly, flipping through the ledger on my desk. "When a marriage ends, it ends. There's no such thing as going back." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, you're right. After all, you both made your choice. It just proves you two really weren't meant to be," Lisa said with a shrug. "That's how it goes sometimes." I smiled faintly. Exactly. That morning passed quickly, and just before noon the director called me into his office. "Mary," he said with a grin, "I've got some good news for you." "What kind of good news?" I asked, a little curious. "The higher-ups have decided to select a group of outstanding employees for professional training in the city," he explained. "And you've been chosen." "Training?" I repeated in surprise. "Yes, for accounting," he said. "It'll last about 3 months. Once you complete it, you'll be promoted to a certified accountant, and your salary will increase quite a bit too." That was good news. "When does it start?" "The beginning of next month," the director replied. "So get ready, it's a great opportunity." I nodded. "Thank you, director. I'll be prepared." Walking out of his office, I couldn't help smiling. I hadn't expected things to go so smoothly, let alone to be given such a chance for advancement. It made me even more certain that leaving my old life behind had been the right decision. After work, I stopped by the market to buy some fresh ingredients. I wanted to make myself a nice dinner to celebrate. But as soon as I reached my building, I saw someone I least wanted to see, John Miller. He was standing near the entrance, waiting. "Mary, you're off work," he said, forcing a smile. I ignored him and headed straight for the stairs. "Mary, please, just listen to me," he called, following behind. "I have nothing to hear from you," I said without turning around. "I know I made mistakes," he said quickly. "But everyone makes mistakes. Can't you give me a chance to make things right?" I stopped and turned to face him, my voice cold. "Do you think love is some kind of game, John? Something you can pick up and drop whenever you feel like it? When you want me, you take me, and when you don't, you throw me away, then come crawling back when it's convenient?" He opened his mouth but had no answer. "And tell me," I continued sharply, "when you were with Linda, did you ever think about giving me another chance?" You didn't," I cut him off. "So don't expect me to give you one now." With that, I turned and started back up the stairs. "Mary," he began again, but I held up a hand. "Don't follow me," I warned. "I don't want to talk to you anymore." He took another step forward, and I stopped, turning back with an icy stare. "John Miller, this is my final warning. If you keep harassing me, I'll call the police." The look in my eyes must have told him I meant it, because he froze. For once, he stayed silent. When I got home, I locked the door and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. That man was truly insufferable. He had betrayed me first, and now, somehow, he had the audacity to act like the victim begging for forgiveness. Enough was enough. I wasn't going to let him disturb my life any longer. The next morning, before work, I took a short leave and went to the local police station. "Officer," I said firmly, "I'd like to file a report." The officer on duty looked up. "What kind of report?" "Someone's been harassing me," I replied. He opened his notebook. "Tell me exactly what's been happening." I described everything in detail, how John had shown up at my workplace, followed me home, and loitered outside my building late at night. "You're divorced, correct?" the officer asked. "Yes," I said, pulling the red divorce certificate from my bag. He examined it and nodded. All right, this definitely qualifies as harassment. We'll send someone to issue a formal warning. Thank you, I said in relief. The officer added, but I'd also advise you to consider moving, if possible. A new environment would help you cut off contact completely. That made sense, and since I'd be leaving for training in the city next month anyway, it was the perfect opportunity to make a clean break. That same afternoon, officers from the station went to speak with John. I heard later that his face turned pale when they warned him, but all he could do was promise not to bother me again. And for the next several days, sure enough, he didn't appear. John Miller never showed up again after that, and I was finally able to focus on my work in peace. About a week later, I received a phone call from the village. It was from Old Man Lee. "Mary, it's me," he said, his voice hoarse. "Dad, what made you think to call me?" I asked gently. "I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing," he said after a pause. "I heard John came to see you a few times." "He did," I replied plainly, "but Dad, you should stop hoping for anything. There's no chance of us getting back together." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before he finally spoke again. "Mary, I understand. That useless boy of mine, he really went too far. Are you doing okay, Dad? How's your health?" "I'm fine," he said quietly. "Just, it weighs on my chest sometimes." "Please take care of yourself," I said softly. "Don't waste your energy worrying about people who don't deserve it." He sighed deeply. "Mary, you take care of yourself out there too." "I will," I said and hung up. For a while, I just sat there, my emotions mixed. Old Man Lee truly was a good man. It was only a pity that his son wasn't. But none of that was my burden anymore. My life was my own now, and I had a new path ahead of me. With my training in the city coming up next month, I started preparing to move. I'd grown fond of my little apartment. It was cozy and peaceful. But it was time for a real, fresh start. A month later, I arrived in the city for my training as planned. Compared to the county, the city was bustling and full of life. Tall buildings everywhere, busy streets, cars honking, people rushing by. The training was held at the City Finance Bureau, and our accommodations were arranged at a nearby guest house. There were dozens of us from different counties, all here for the same 3-month accounting program. Everyone was serious and motivated, and the daily schedule was packed from morning to night. I threw myself into the lessons wholeheartedly. I knew this was my chance to change my future. If I mastered the professional skills, I could build a life for myself here in the city. Among the trainees was a man named David Wang, an accounting supervisor from a nearby county's cooperative. He was a few years older than me, polite, educated, and calm, always wearing a neat pair of glasses that gave him a scholarly look. "Miss Zhang," he asked one evening during our study session, holding a sheet of exercises, "do you know how to solve this problem?" I glanced at it. It was indeed a tricky calculation. "Let me try," I said, then carefully worked it out step by step, explaining my process as I went. "Ah, I see now," David said with a look of realization. "You're really talented. I couldn't figure this one out at all." "It's nothing," I replied modestly. "I guess I'm just good with numbers." "Have you studied accounting before?" he asked curiously. "No," I said, smiling. "I just started learning a few months ago." David's admiration deepened. "Then you have a real gift. You should consider further studies." "Further studies?" I echoed. "Yes," he nodded seriously. "The college entrance exams are starting again. Someone with your background and ability could definitely get into a university." His words made me pause. He was right. This was the year the national exams were officially reinstated. With my education level, getting into a university wouldn't be too difficult if I studied hard enough. "You really think I could pass?" I asked. "Absolutely," David said confidently. "You're intelligent, hardworking, and determined. You'd have no problem." Something warm stirred in my chest. Since my divorce, no one had spoken to me with such encouragement. "Thank you," I said sincerely. He smiled. "Don't thank me. We're all here to help each other." "By the way," he asked casually, "which county are you from?" "Pingyang County," I said. "Oh, I'm from Linshui. That's not far from you." We kept talking and soon realized we had plenty in common. David was thoughtful, with big ambitions and clear goals. "I think our country is changing fast," he said one evening. "People like us, young and educated, should seize this moment. If we work hard, the future can be completely different." "You're right," I agreed quietly. So, I really mean it, he continued. You should consider taking the entrance exam. This is the perfect time. Back in my room later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about his words. I gave David Wong's suggestion some serious thought. He was right. Having been given a second chance at life, I should seize every opportunity that came my way. In my past life, I had been nothing more than an ordinary village woman. But this time, why shouldn't I aim higher? The idea of taking the college entrance exam filled me with excitement. If I could get into a university, I could completely change my destiny and live a life that was truly my own. The next day, I went to speak with one of the instructors at the training program to ask about the exam. The college entrance exam? The teacher said, looking a bit surprised. Mary, you want to take it? Yes, sir, I said firmly. I'd like to give it a try. He studied my grades for a moment, then nodded. With your foundation, you definitely have a chance, but be prepared, it's going to be very competitive. I'm confident, I said without hesitation. Good, he replied with an encouraging smile. I'll get you some review materials you can study during your free time. The teacher was very supportive and gave me a thick stack of study guides and practice exams. From that day forward, every minute of my life revolved around learning. When I wasn't in accounting class, I was studying for the entrance exam. Math, literature, politics, history. I treated every subject seriously. David Wang continued to help me whenever he could, patiently explaining anything I didn't understand. With how hard you're working, he said one evening, you're bound to get into a good university. I hope so, I said with a small smile. 2 months into the training, my accounting skills had improved tremendously, and my exam preparation was going just as well. When the teacher reviewed my mock test results, he smiled in satisfaction. Mary, he said, your scores are excellent. You have a real chance at getting into a top university. The words sent a thrill through me. A top university, that was something I'd never even dared to dream of before. Teacher, I asked, what major do you think I should choose? Given your talent for numbers, he said thoughtfully, I'd recommend economics. The country is starting to open up now, and people with economic and financial expertise are going to be in high demand. Economics. The word itself sounded full of promise. I decided right then that would be my direction. During the final month of training, I worked even harder. Accounting lessons during the day, exam prep at night, barely sleeping at all. David started to look worried. You're going to wear yourself out like this, he said. I'll be fine, I reassured him. I'm still young, I can handle it. Still, you should balance work and rest, he insisted. I will, after the exam, I said with a tired smile. He looked at me for a moment, his eyes softening. Mary, can I ask you a personal question? What kind of question? Are you married? I froze for a second, caught off guard. I was, I said quietly, but I'm divorced. Oh, David said, his face turning slightly red. I see, I just think a woman like you deserves something better. I understood what he was implying, and my emotions stirred a little. David really was a good man, educated, ambitious, and kind, but right now my heart wasn't ready for anything beyond my own goals. Thank you for saying that, I said gently. But right now, I just want to focus on studying. I'm not thinking about anything else. David nodded understandingly. That makes sense. Education should come first. By the time the training ended, my accounting skills had become solid and refined. The instructor praised me highly. Mary, you're one of the best trainees in this entire program, he said as he handed me my certificate. I had officially earned my accountant qualification, a key that could open doors to much better opportunities. But more importantly, I had already registered for the college entrance exam. All that was left now was to take it. Before we parted, David handed me a slip of paper with his address on it. Mary, he said sincerely, I hope we can stay in touch. Of course, I replied with a smile. And if you ever need my help? Of course, I told David with a small smile. If you ever need anything, you can always reach out. When I returned to the county after training, everything felt different, almost as if the entire world had shifted. My coworkers looked at me with admiration now, not pity or curiosity. Mary, congratulations, the director said cheerfully. You're now a certified accountant, and your salary will be raised immediately. Thank you, Director, for giving me this opportunity, I said sincerely. He waved a hand. You should be thanking yourself for your hard work. You've earned it. We're going to cultivate talents like you carefully. Our cooperative needs people like you." With the promotion and the pay raise, my life had changed dramatically. But what excited me even more was that the college entrance exam was right around the corner. For the first time in a long while, I felt my future unfolding with possibility. That night, I was at home studying when I suddenly heard someone calling my name from downstairs. Puzzled, I went to the window and froze when I saw Old Man Lee standing in the courtyard, dusty and out of breath, looking terribly anxious. "Dad," I called down, alarmed. "What are you doing here?" I hurried downstairs. "Mary, something's happened," he said, his voice trembling. "What happened?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "It's John. He's in trouble." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of trouble?" "He ran off with that girl, Linda Green," Old Man Lee said, wiping at his eyes. "They tried to elope, but her family caught them. They beat him and broke his legs." The words stunned me. John and Linda had eloped? "Where is he now?" I asked after a moment. "At the county hospital," the old man said, nearly in tears. "Mary, I know I shouldn't have come to you, but I'm desperate. I don't have the money for his treatment, and he's still unconscious." I looked at him, feeling torn. No matter what had happened between John and me, Old Man Lee had always treated me kindly, almost like a daughter. "Don't worry, Dad," I said softly. "Let's go to the hospital first and see how bad it is." You're willing to come?" He looked at me, astonished. "I'll go see," I said evenly, "but that doesn't mean I'm taking responsibility. We're divorced now, and that hasn't changed." I know, he said quickly, nodding again and again. We went to the county hospital together. In the emergency ward, I saw John Miller lying on the bed, pale and still. His legs were both in casts, and he looked frail, almost lifeless. Linda Green sat beside him, her eyes swollen from crying. When she saw me walk in, she froze, her face full of embarrassment. "Mary," she started, but I ignored her. Turning to the doctor, I asked calmly, "How is the patient's condition?" "Both legs are broken," the doctor explained. "He also has a mild concussion. He'll need to stay for observation for a while." "How much will the treatment cost?" I asked. "The initial treatment and hospitalization will be about 500 yuan, the doctor replied. That amount wasn't much for me now, but for Old Man Lee, it was a huge sum. I looked at John lying there unconscious, and a mix of emotions filled me. Bitterness, anger, even a faint trace of pity. In my past life, this man's betrayal had driven me to my death. Now it seemed fate had found its own way of balancing the scales. But because of his father, I decided to help, just this once. "Doctor," I said, "please go ahead with the treatment. I'll cover the costs for now." Old Man Lee's eyes welled up immediately. "Mary, thank you, child. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me," I said firmly. "I'm only covering it temporarily. When he recovers, he'll have to pay me back." Of course, he said quickly, nodding again. Linda stayed silent, her head bowed low, not daring to speak. I went to the payment counter, paid the bill, and came back to the old man. "Dad, I've done what I can. The rest is your family's business." "Mary, thank you," he said again, tears spilling down his weathered face. "There's no need," I said quietly. "I only did it out of respect for you." With that, I turned and walked out of the hospital. As I made my way home through the cool night air, I felt strangely calm. Helping Old Man Lee was the right thing to do, but between John and me, there was truly nothing left. His fate, life or death, had nothing to do with me anymore. My only focus now was to prepare for the college entrance exam and fight for my own future. When the exams finally came, I felt ready. During those 2 testing days, everything went smoothly. I answered each subject confidently, and the math section, once my strongest subject, felt almost effortless. Those complex calculations that stumped others were, to me, a piece of cake. After finishing the last exam, I walked out of the testing hall feeling light and free. Many other students looked worried or drained, but I was filled with quiet confidence. "Mary, how did it go?" a girl who'd taken the test with me asked. "Not bad," I said with a small smile. "I think it went pretty well." "You're amazing," she said. "You don't look nervous at all." "There's no point in being nervous," I replied calmly. "I studied what I needed to. The rest is up to fate." Back home, I settled into the waiting period. I continued my work at the cooperative and stayed calm. No matter what the results would be, I had already done my best. Even if I didn't get into college, I still had a stable job and a life that I controlled, something I'd once thought impossible. But deep down, I still hoped to be admitted, because that would mean a truly new beginning. A month later, the results were posted. My total score was 456 points, more than 30 points above the cutoff for top universities. When I saw my score, I nearly burst into tears from joy. When my director heard the news, he was just as excited. "Mary, that's incredible. Our cooperative finally produced a college student." "Thank you for your support, Director," I said gratefully. "You've worked hard and earned every bit of it. So which university are you planning to apply to?" "I'm thinking of the Provincial University of Economics and Finance," I said. "Excellent choice," he said approvingly. "Graduates from that school have a bright future ahead of them." I submitted my application, listing economics at the provincial university as my first choice. With my score, I knew I had a strong chance of being accepted. All that was left to do was wait for the admission letter. Around that time, I received a letter from David Wang. He congratulated me warmly on my results and shared some good news of his own. "Mary, congratulations on your excellent score. I've also been admitted to the Provincial Normal University. That means we'll both be in the same city. I hope we can meet again soon." Reading his words brought a smile to my face. Having a friend in the provincial capital would make things much easier. And David was a genuinely good man, steady, intelligent, and kind. 2 weeks later, my admission letter arrived. Economics Department, Provincial University of Finance and Economics. As I held the red and gold envelope in my hands, tears blurred my vision. It felt like a miracle, a turning point I'd once thought impossible. From a rural wife abandoned by her husband to a university student about to start anew, the change was almost unreal. When I showed the letter to my director, he beamed with pride. "Mary, you've brought such honor to our cooperative. We're so proud of you, though we'll surely miss having you here." "Don't worry, Director," I said. "I'll recommend someone capable to take over my work before I leave." "Good," he said, smiling warmly. "We'll be waiting for the day you come back as a real professional." When my parents heard the news, they were overjoyed. "Mary, you're the pride of our family," my mother said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's all thanks to you and Dad," I said softly. Father shook his head. "No, it's your effort that made this happen. But remember, university isn't the finish line. Keep studying hard." "I will, Dad," I promised. Just as I was preparing to leave for school, Old Man Lee showed up again. He looked even older than before. His hair had turned almost completely white. "Mary," he said, smiling faintly, "I heard you got into college." "Yes, Dad," I said. "Congratulations," he said sincerely. "You're truly a remarkable young woman." "Thank you," I replied, touched. He hesitated for a moment before finally speaking again. "Mary, I came to ask you a favor." "What kind of favor?" I asked cautiously. "It's John," he said, lowering his head. "He wants to see you." I frowned. "See me? What for?" He said, "He wants to apologize to you in person." I paused, unsure what to feel. In the end, I agreed. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll see him one last time." The next day, I went to the county hospital. John Miller was awake now, but still lying in bed, his face pale and weak. When he saw me walk in, his eyes flickered with complicated emotions. "Mary, you came," he said in a faint voice. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my tone cool and even. "I wanted to apologize," he said, looking straight into my eyes. "Mary, I'm sorry, I truly am. I wronged you." "As long as you know that," I said flatly. "I finally understand now," he continued weakly. "You're the best woman in the world, and I was too blind to see it." "You should have realized that a long time ago," I replied. John's eyes turned red. "Mary, can we—" "No," I interrupted before he could finish. "Some mistakes can never be forgiven. But I really know I was wrong," he said desperately. "Then that's enough," I said, meeting his gaze calmly. "But there's no way for us to start over. I've moved on. I have a new life now." "What do you mean?" he asked in disbelief. "I'm going to college," I said. His eyes widened. "College?" "Yes. The Provincial University of Finance and Economics," I said with quiet pride. John was silent for a long time before he gave a bitter smile. "I guess I was never good enough for you." "It doesn't matter anymore," I said, standing up. "Take care of yourself, John. I wish you well." "Mary," he murmured softly as I turned to leave, but I didn't look back. Walking out of the hospital, I felt a rush of complicated emotions. sadness, closure, and relief all at once. That would be the last time I ever saw John Miller. From that moment on, we truly belonged to two different worlds. I was about to head to the provincial capital to begin a new chapter of my life, while he would stay behind in that small county town, growing old with his regrets. On the day of my departure, many people came to see me off: my director, co-workers, parents, and several neighbors and friends. Everyone was happy for me, though there was a trace of reluctance in their smiles. "Mary, once you get to the city, make sure to write often," my mother said. "Study hard, and don't worry about home," my father added. "If things ever get difficult, call us," my director said warmly. Hearing all their kind words and encouragement filled my heart with warmth. These were the people who truly cared for me, the most precious people in my life. As the train slowly began to move, I watched the familiar scenery of the county town fade into the distance. My heart was full of anticipation. A new life was waiting for me. And this time, I was determined to live it for myself, to make it something beautiful. When I arrived in the provincial capital, I was stunned. The city was even more prosperous than I had imagined. Towering skyscrapers, busy streets, and crowds of people full of energy and purpose. The University of Finance and Economics was located right in the city center. Though the campus wasn't large, it was beautiful. Rows of plane trees lining the paths, sunlight filtering through the leaves, and the distant hum of students reciting lessons. It was exactly the kind of university life I had dreamed of. On the first day of orientation, I met my roommates. Lily Snow from Beijing was the daughter of a high-ranking official and had grown up with every privilege imaginable. Maggie Wong from Shanghai came from a successful business family and had seen much of the world. Fang Liu, a cheerful local girl, was easygoing and kind. When they heard about my past, they all looked at me with genuine admiration. "Mary, you're amazing," Lily said. "To get into college after a divorce, that takes real courage." "Seriously," Maggie agreed. "I don't think I'd have been brave enough to do what you did." "It's nothing," I said with a small smile. "People have to move forward. That's the only way to live." Fang gave me a thumbs up. "I like your attitude. We could all learn something from you." The university courses were even more fascinating than I had expected. Economics, statistics, accounting, finance, each one more captivating than the last. The professors were brilliant scholars who opened my mind to worlds I had never imagined. One in particular stood out, Professor Zhang, who taught economics. He often connected his lectures to real-world global trends, making every class feel alive with meaning and insight. "Students," Professor Zhang said, his deep voice steady and full of conviction, "the world is changing rapidly. Our country is entering a new era of reform and opening up. For those of you studying economics, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In the next 10 years, China's economy will develop at an unprecedented pace. We'll need countless talented people in economic management and finance. So study hard and one day contribute your skills to the nation's progress." His words lit a fire inside me. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of purpose. I knew I had chosen the right major, one that carried promise and responsibility. Outside of class, I kept myself busy. When I wasn't reviewing my coursework, I threw myself into various campus activities: student government, the debate club, the English corner, anything that would help me grow. Those activities not only sharpened my abilities, but also brought me new friends and confidence. Among the many students I met, one stood out: Eric Chen, the president of the student union and also our class monitor. He was bright, capable, and well-respected among the students. "Mary," Eric said to me one afternoon, "you're really talented. Have you ever thought about joining the student union?" I blinked in surprise. "Me? I don't know if I'm qualified." "Of course you are," he said firmly. "You've got life experience that most of us don't. You're mature, capable, and you work well under pressure. We could really use someone like you." After thinking it over, I decided to give it a try. "All right," I said finally, "I'll do it." Once I joined the student union, my college life became even busier, but also more fulfilling. I attended lectures during the day, handled student affairs in the evenings, and organized events on weekends. It was exhausting, but I thrived in that rhythm of purpose and activity. Through the experience, I discovered a new side of myself. My organizational and leadership skills improved dramatically, and my classmates began to trust and respect me even more. "Mary, you're incredible," my roommate Lily Snow said one night as we studied together. "You manage your studies and student union work so well. It's unbelievable." I smiled modestly. "Maybe it's just because I'm a little older. I've learned to stay calm and focused." It was true. I was several years older than most of my classmates. My life experience had been full of hardship, but those difficult years had given me something valuable: resilience. I had learned to appreciate every opportunity and to never waste time. During the second semester of my freshman year, I received a letter from David Wang. He wrote that his studies at the Normal University were going well, and that he'd also joined the student union. "Mary, I've been in the capital for more than half a year now, and I really love it here," he wrote. "After graduation, I want to stay and work in the city. What about you? Have you thought about your plans?" I replied that I also hoped to stay in the capital after graduation. The city was full of opportunities, a place where hard work could actually change your destiny. David and I began writing to each other often, sharing details of our studies and lives. Sometimes on weekends, we'd meet, walking through the park or catching a movie. He was gentle, thoughtful, and easy to talk to. There was comfort in our friendship, though neither of us ever mentioned anything beyond that. We both seemed content to keep things as they were, simple and unspoken. By the end of my freshman year, I ranked first in my class. My professional courses were excellent, and my English had improved remarkably. One afternoon, Professor Zhang called me to his office. "Mary," he said with a proud smile, "your academic performance has been outstanding. I think you should consider applying to study abroad." "Study abroad?" I repeated, stunned. I had never dared to imagine such a thing. "Yes," he said, leaning forward. "The government is beginning to sponsor top students to study in developed countries. With your grades, you have a real chance at a fully funded opportunity." "But my English isn't good enough yet," I said honestly. "Your foundation is strong," he reassured me. "With one more year of hard work, you'll be ready. Think seriously about it. This is a rare opportunity, one that could change your life." That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought of studying in another country, learning the most advanced knowledge in the world, made my heart race. If I could go abroad and return with what I'd learned, I knew my future would never be the same again. I made up my mind to give everything I had for that goal. That summer, I didn't go home. Instead, I stayed on campus to study English. From early morning until late at night, my days revolved entirely around the language. Listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Every skill had to reach a high level if I wanted to pass. When David Wang learned about my plan, he wrote me an encouraging letter. "Mary, you're truly remarkable," he said. "If you can study abroad, I know you'll achieve great things. I'll be here, waiting for your return." His words deeply moved me. Though we had never defined our relationship, I could feel the sincerity in his affection. Maybe, I thought, when I came back from abroad, we could see where our connection might lead. When the summer break ended, I returned to school with renewed focus. My English had improved dramatically, and my grades in my major remained the highest in my class. But the biggest surprise came one afternoon, when the school announced a list of candidates recommended for a government-funded study abroad program. My name was on it. If I passed the final selection, I would get the chance to study for 2 years at a prestigious university in the United States. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, one I was determined to seize. The selection process was rigorous. It tested not only professional knowledge but also English fluency and oral interviews. I prepared meticulously, rehearsing every possible question and polishing every sentence I might need to say. On the day of the exam, I performed smoothly. Each stage went better than I could have hoped. A month later, the results were announced. I had been chosen. I was officially awarded a government scholarship to study in the US. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. From being a rural farmer's wife to now an international student sponsored by the state, it felt like a dream. But it was real. My hard work had truly changed my fate. Before leaving the country, I returned to my hometown to visit my parents. When they saw me again, their faces glowed with pride. "Mary, you're the pride of our family," my mother said, her voice trembling with emotion. Mom, I couldn't have made it here without you and Dad, I replied. Father smiled, though his eyes were glistening. It's your own effort that matters most. When you get overseas, study hard. Make your country proud. I will, Dad, I promised. I also made a special trip to see Old Man Lee. He looked frail but still spirited, and when he saw me, his face lit up with joy. Mary, you've truly made something of yourself, he said, voice shaking with excitement. If only my foolish son had been half as sensible as you. Please take care of yourself, Dad, I said softly. I will, he said quickly, but his eyes grew wet. Mary, you're a good girl, you'll be blessed for it. Before I left, I handed him some money. Dad, please take this, buy something good for yourself, I won't need it overseas. No, I can't take your money, he protested, waving his hands. Please, I insisted gently. Think of it as a little token of gratitude. He finally accepted it, tears streaming down his face. That old man had treated me with nothing but kindness. I would never forget his warmth. When I left the county for the last time, I didn't visit John Miller. I'd heard that he had recovered but was left with a permanent limp. Linda Green had abandoned him and married someone else. He now lived alone, struggling to get by. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. I had my own path to walk, and he had to bear the weight of his own choices. Everyone is responsible for the life they create. As the plane lifted off the runway, I looked down at the land beneath me, growing smaller and smaller. My heart swelled with hope and excitement. A new life was about to begin.